Did you know that in the years before Bram Stoker's Dracula was published, there was already an extremely popular story about a horrifying vampire-like creature from Romania? This creature is known as the Strigoi, and it has similarities to vampires, but also some very disturbing differences. So join me today as we look at one of the earliest known stories about a Romanian vampire, the true story of the Strigoi. It was a dark and stormy night in Transylvania when young Vladimir went out to visit his friend Peter, who was sick. The two friends were walking home after visiting the sick man when they heard a knock on the gate to their village. They opened it and found a strange woman with a staff asking for shelter for the night. She appeared to be drunk and kept calling herself the devil. They took her in and gave her food and drink, and she told them that she had come from the city of Deva, and that she was looking for her daughter who had run away from home. They talked for a while longer, and then she went upstairs to bed. The next morning, Vladimir got up early and went to see the woman. He noticed that her skin was unnaturally white, like that of a corpse, and he became scared that they had taken in a ghost or a demon. When he went to check on his friend Peter, he found that he had disappeared, and so had his bed. And as Vladimir was about to leave the house to search for them, he felt something bite him on the neck. Turning round, he saw the spectre of the old woman standing over him with blood dripping down her mouth. With that, she vanished and reappeared outside, where she changed into a wolf and howled at the moon. Vladimir ran out of the village to warn the others, but no one believed him until he showed them Peter's torn clothes. At first, they wanted to kill the woman, but a priest convinced them to wait until morning. And when they went to search for the woman, they found that she had vanished. And the next day, everyone in the village turned pale and fell ill. Only Vladimir seemed to be immune. After recovering, Vladimir and his mother went to live in a different village. Sometime later, though, he started having visions of a demonic woman draining the life force from people, and he knew he had to do something to stop her. Gathering a group of armed men, he returned to his old village, where he tracked the hag to an abandoned church. As he entered, he found her bathing in a pool of blood. He shot her, but she regenerated immediately. Then he chopped off her head, only for it to grow back. Eventually, he struck her down with a stake through the heart, and with that, she died. And so good triumphed over evil that day, and the village was saved. But this wasn't the end of the story, because soon after, all of the villagers began to act strangely. They started biting people on the neck and drinking their blood, just like animals. And it didn't take long before the entire village was infected by this bloodlust. Soon, the other villagers began to fall victim to it too, and it seemed as if the land would be overrun by these blood-sucking maniacs. But then, just as suddenly as it started, it all came to a halt. All those who had been bitten survived, and many of the women became pregnant. It seemed that they had somehow been cured. But 9 months later, all of their children were born with fangs and an insatiable thirst for blood. And so it seemed that the only cure for being bitten was to bear children who were born vampires. So now you know the story of the Strigoi. But what exactly is a Strigoi? Well, it's actually a word that comes from Romanian folklore, and it means a type of vampire that lives inside a person and compels them to do its bidding. You see, The Strigoi was an unsung creature that lived in the shadows and only came out at night to suck blood. Instead, it was more like a parasite that used a host and drove them insane, making them behave like a vampire. The Strigoi was said to live inside the body of a person and feed on their life essence. It would then compel the person to perform certain actions, such as drinking blood or biting others on the neck. In some cases, the Strigoi was said to be able to completely control its host, turning them into a mindless puppet that did its bidding. This is similar to the way that a vampire is often portrayed in literature and film, such as in Bram Stoker's Dracula, where the vampire is an evil spirit that possesses a person and turns them into a blood-sucking monster. However, the Strigoi was also said to have a physical form, although it was usually only seen as a shadow or a dark cloud. In some cases, though, it was said to appear in a more solid form, such as in the story of Vlad the Impaler, which I covered in a previous video. In this story, Vlad was hunting in the forest with his men when he saw a wounded wolf. Taking pity on the animal, he carried it back to his men and nursed it back to health. But it turned out that the wolf was actually a Strigoi in disguise, and it took the form of a beautiful woman and tried to seduce Vlad. Now, as you may have guessed, the Strigoi was also sometimes associated with shape-shifting, just like in the story of Vladimir and his friend Peter, where the hag was able to turn herself into a wolf. Shape-shifting is a common motif in vampire lore, and it's often used to represent the creature's ability to disguise itself and infiltrate human society undetected. Another similarity between the Strigoi and the modern vampire is that both creatures were often associated with death and disease. In Romanian folklore, it was believed that the Strigoi could bring disease and pestilence to a village, and it was also said that the Strigoi was responsible for the deaths of many people. This is similar to the way that vampires were often portrayed in the past as being the cause of disease and death in a community. However, there are also some important differences between the Strigoi and the modern vampire. For example, the Strigoi was not typically depicted as having superhuman strength or immortality, which are common traits of vampires in modern fiction. Additionally, the Strigoi was not always shown as being evil. In some cases, it was seen as a neutral force of nature that simply existed to feed on the life force of humans. Ultimately, the Strigoi is a fascinating creature from Romanian folklore that shares many similarities with the modern vampire. While the similarities are striking, there are also some important differences. Nevertheless, the Strigoi's influence can still be seen in modern conceptions of vampires, and it remains an important part of vampire lore. Now, before I let you go, I want to know your opinion on something. Do you think that creatures like the Strigoi were actually real, or are they just figments of people's imaginations? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to learn more about Romanian vampire folklore, then stay tuned for more videos. And as always, thank you for watching.